Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Laurens Goyvaerts.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. We are live on location in Leuven, Belgium. We just finished the Neurotech Leaders Forum conference, which was held for the first time in Europe. And Frederik Ceyssens, you were there. You did a presentation talking about ReVision, which is your company based here in Leuven. And you said, anybody who wants to come on over, I'm just across the street. And so I took you up on that offer. So I'm here with you and some of the workers or employees at ReVision. So this is basically a company to restore vision for the blind, and not based on Pixium, not based on Second Sight or recycled or refurbished tech from them, but you guys are making your own tech and your own companies. So pleasure to have you here and come on the show. And do you want to introduce yourself and the company, and then I think we'll talk to the rest of the crew too.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Frederik. I worked on neural implants for quite a while as part of my postdoc. So I did research on extremely flexible implants that nicely move along with brain tissue for about 6 years. It was together with a neurosurgeon who really wanted to have something to measure in cavities in the brain that arise after you got a tumor resection or after a hemorrhage. Then at the end of the postdoc, I was really thinking what to do next with my life, either to move on to something else or to try to do something with whatever I'd learned. Because this recording application was obviously more like a scientific experiment. It was not really anything that would lead to a therapy real soon. And I really came to the conclusion that there was not enough done for blind people. So people like Second Sight, you already mentioned it, had already put a visual prosthesis on the market, but frankly, it was just not good enough to be widely adapted, and there was really more needed to help blind people in a way that would be good enough for wide adoption. So that's how I decided to focus on visual prosthesis. I met a professor that actually was working on neural implants and also on research on the visual system in monkeys. So he was called Peter Janssen. He was really supportive. There's also a neurosurgeon that supported it from the beginning. Then together with Peter, I got a small university grant to do already some research. And then after a few months, we also found some local business people who wanted to invest early stage, but really early stage. I was just nothing at that point. So then, we were super happy to go to the university to say, look, we found investors for our research project. The university wasn't so happy because it didn't fall into their normal scheme of doing things, because normally they spin out technologies which are much more mature. So basically, we didn't really find an agreement, but I did resign my university job then to start the company anyway. And then some professors like Peter, but also like Michael, still wanted to collaborate, like they would collaborate with any company. And this is also which brought us here. So we did get contracts with these guys to do research together, partially sponsored by our startup company then, but also partially by grants we got after starting up the company. Basically, for a while I was the only employee, but Maarten was already working at the university at that point, and 1 year later he got his own PhD grant, which was a special PhD grant that allows you to work at a company while doing research at the same time. So I'm super glad that Maarten could join relatively quickly. And then Laurens basically is a friend of Maarten, well, I think you're friends still, right? Yeah. and he joined one year later also to work as PhD student together.
Excellent. And so what was the timeline of this? When did you quit the postdoc?
It was 4.5 years ago.
4.5 years ago, okay. Wow, cool. Okay, so you guys are sharing a microphone, so do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, so hi, thanks for having us, and also it's nice to have you here in Leuven with us. So I'm Maarten Schelles. I met Frederik 5 years ago while he was wondering what to do with his life next after his postdoc. I was also wondering what to do after my studies in electrical and biomedical engineering. And so I met Frederik, and then indeed combining it with my PhD at the University at KU Leuven. I also joined ReVision. In the past years, I've been working on electrode fabrication, electrode design, but also using these for stimulation patterns, to try out stimulation patterns in animals, and also working on the electronics around the electrodes to work towards fully wireless product in the future that can really help blind people to use it in their daily life. I was able to combine my work at ReVision in the past years with my PhD at Leuven, like I said. I also successfully defended my PhD a month ago, so really glad to have that defended. And then I'm now also continuing my job at ReVision Implant, working towards this complete prototype.
And so what are you working on specifically? Like what's your, I guess, role? Or
Yeah, so specifically, I took up the role as CTO, and so specifically in the first years, I also, all of us worked a lot on the electrode design and electrode fabrication, and then throughout the years, I transitioned more towards the development of the whole electronic system around the electrodes to get a couple of steps closer to a full product.
Yeah, thank you also for having me. I'm Laurens Goyvaerts, and like Maarten, we have a similar path. We really walk the same path as real friends do, let's say. So I met Frederik a year after Maarten, but when I was still doing my master's thesis at IMEC, across the street again. Like Frederik always likes to visit them as well. And it really went quite smoothly since then. So I'm also still doing my PhD, so I still need to defend, unlike Maarten. But it's really going well. I really love to work at the company, and I'm currently the CSO, the Chief Scientific Officer of the company, or as we like to call it, the Chief Sheep Officer. Because as part of my PhD, I'm doing the sheep experiments where we want to focus on the biocompatibility and the lifetime of the implant. So that's a bit of what I'm doing here.
Yeah, excellent. And then before we started recording, you showed a little bit of accelerating agent setup and electrochemistry and all this kind of stuff, all this. So do you want to talk about ReVision? What is it? Who's it for? How's it different than these other companies?
Yeah, all right. As you know, the first attempts to build a visual prosthesis really focused on putting a lot of electrodes in the eyes of blind people. Well, a lot was maybe relative. The first companies that went to the market, like Second Sight, had 60 electrodes. If you downsize an image to 60 pixels, you will quickly see that there's not that much to see anymore. There's some of the users actually were surprisingly good at handling their 60 or actually less than 60 pixels, because not all of them worked. Okay, that had some adoption. A few hundreds were sold, but it was not enough to really take off. So then other companies actually followed the lead of Second Sight, but they just thought we'll just upscale the number of electrodes. There's been several examples, right? There's Pixium Vision. They're still kind of around. They were acquired by Science Corp recently. There was NanoRetina. There was a German company, Artificial Vision AG, I think. That also had something with 1,000 electrodes, but quickly it became clear that doesn't translate to something equivalent to a few 2,000 pixels. So the nerves in the eye are extremely close together. You just have a few square millimeters where everything is packed together. Then there's also still axons of neurons coming from regions further away, just traveling over other neurons and over other rods and cones. So you have basically often 7 layers of neurons on top of each other, but with connections that come from different areas. So the stimulation often yields some like smeared out images, not clear dots, so not easily interpreted. So there are quite some issues with this. And then of course you still have to have viable neurons in your eye, which also doesn't happen with all causes of blindness. These companies were also looking at retinitis pigmentosa, macular degeneration as the 2 main indications. So there are, of course, also advantages to that approach, especially that it's relatively low invasive. So, of course, it's less risky to implant something in somebody's eye, especially if they're already blind, compared to implanting something in the brain, which is what we are doing. But the main reason why we went to the brain, and we actually see that other companies actually drew the same conclusion. Even Second Sight eventually decided to just build a brain-focused version of their 60 electrode implant after they had some success with the eye implant, but not enough to be really a breakthrough. The main reason is just the fact that the area that you can interface with there is much larger. Than you're talking about per hemisphere something like 16 square centimeter. It's almost 100 times more than you would have in the eye. So the chance that you can have a neurostimulation result with sufficient resolution is much higher. Plus, of course, the fact that blind people in 98% of cases actually still have functional visual cortex. So it would also help for much wider indication than only for specific cases like retinitis. And then the third reason is also that these patients that have these, say, conditions where their eyes are completely lost, like from accidents, from optic nerve compression and so on, are typically also a bit younger than the typical cases of blindness that you would be able to resolve with a retinal prosthesis. So also these people could enjoy the implant for a longer time and would also be more, say, mentally flexible to really undergo the procedure, but also all the training and the revalidation afterwards. So even though it looked much more risky at first, if it turned out that the risk benefit for a brain implant to restore vision could be actually much better than that for a retinal prosthesis in many cases. So that's what actually drew us there to actually focus on the brain, and yeah, we haven't regretted it since, but of course we're still at the beginning of our journey, so you'll never know, of course. But just because there's also other companies, of course, there is the second side that I mentioned, but also Neuralink is also planning to build a visual prosthesis that also focus on the brain. It really reinforces this thought that we've made the right choice there.
Yeah, and the vision is the one indication or one target that really does need thousands of electrodes. The other ones, it's like, well, for vagal nerve stimulation or whatever, you don't need 1,000 or 10,000 or something like this. But with the vision, it is nice. It's kind of a bit more fun. You can really push the limits, and so you were talking also about the minimum number of like pixels and like you said, also it doesn't necessarily translate to pixels. You get more like phosphenes, so like smears and different shapes, and it's not necessarily a square block or something like that. But how many, I guess, phosphenes or pixels are you guys targeting?
Well, we make a distinction between like physical electrodes and virtual electrodes. So the number of physical electrodes that we are targeting would be 2,000, so about 1,000 per hemisphere, which doesn't necessarily translate to 1,000 pixels. We actually hope to get more than 1,000 phosphenes then, because of the current steering and other techniques that we're adding on top of the simple unipolar stimulation. So actually that's also part of Maarten's research. So we use techniques like current steering, sending a current that comes out of a single electrode in different directions, thereby activating different axons. They're often some partially overlapping, but we have already done statistical analysis on our measurements, and we've noticed that the factor of 5 is a realistic thing to expect. So we do expect that these 2,000 pixels of 2,000 physical electrodes could yield something like 10,000 different phosphenes. Some might be a bit less in quality. Indeed, you already mentioned, it's not always a nice blob. People will also probably have to learn to interpret these things as an image, like with a cochlear implant as well. People that get those implants never can hear well the first days and weeks. It's really a training process. You really need to rewire your brain, basically. But if you're young enough and you really put in the effort, it really helps you to understand the conversation afterwards. And based on what we know, but of course there's still some uncertainty, we think it's similar in the visual system.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So yeah, potentially 10,000. That's very good. Yes.
If I can quickly add to that, the reason we're also focusing so much on high resolution rather than indeed the lower resolution, let's say, that you have in cochlear implants or vagus nerve stimulation is that, especially lately, we've been talking more and more to blind patients who will be the future users of our visual prosthesis. And we noticed that actually the things that they want to get out of the visual prosthesis, that there's large differences in what they want to get out of it. We've had people that told us that the thing that they want to do the most is go to a different city that they have never been to, being able to take a train on their own, being able to walk around without, of course, bumping into other people or being run over by a car. On the other hand, we've also had people that told us that what they miss the most is just recognizing people on the street. So while their disease was progressing, they stopped recognizing people that they knew from beforehand, and that way they really felt excluded from social life. And so this big difference in what people actually want to get out of it. Some people really want a large field of view. Some people really want a lot of details, and this also results in the fact that we need to aim for such a high resolution, combined and with a large field of view, in order to give all future users what they wish for, of course.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, facial recognition, like navigating a street and not being run over by a car, that's one thing. That's like a lower level. But yeah, recognizing somebody's face, that's very ambitious. And I mean, maybe with the 10,000 virtual electrodes, it's also possible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's good to mention, like we have always said, it's not really for us to decide what blind patients should see or what we are putting in their brain. It's really what they should let us know what they want. And it's like what Maarten said, there are different user criteria for different persons, but at least we want to try to make our device work for the vast majority of users.
Wow.
Yeah. If I may still add there's also still the aspect of the algorithm that translates video images to a stimulation pattern. And we're also thinking, suppose we would need a plan B, suppose we would only be able to achieve, well, only, then it's still a few thousand different phosphenes. It could still be possible to have different algorithms that people can like easily select, one that would give like a broad overview of, but then of course low in resolution of your environment, and one that would really zoom in a lot, so you could still recognize, say, letters, one word at a time, or a face, one face at a time. And this way, there could be also a workaround. But that's of course something we can only research properly after you have some patients implanted. So that's really going to be a process, of course.
Yeah, almost like you would reduce the frame rate or something like this, or almost take a picture and it takes longer to transmit or whatever. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But that sounds pretty also computationally intensive, the 10,000 virtual electrodes. I mean, is it like, what kind of processors and what kind of power would you guys be burning through to be able to process, I guess, 10,000? To me, that sounds very, I guess, inefficient or very, computationally intensive.
So there we are relatively lucky, I would say, that at least right now, the algorithms that we apply to the camera images that we capture with our camera glasses to transform these camera images into stimulation patterns are, at least right now, quite straightforward. So they try to mimic whatever happens in the retina and to mimic the signals that actually arrive in the visual cortex of people that are not visually impaired. So in contrast to some other applications, some other electrical neural stimulation applications, the algorithms right now are quite straightforward. Of course, we'll have to see once we go through clinical trials. It might be that probably we'll have to still fine-tune it a lot. But right now, we are able to run these algorithms just on a portable microprocessor.
Okay. And so what does this system look like? You mentioned glasses and a camera, portable microcontroller. Do you have to wear a hat that powers it, or what's the form factor?
So right now we envision the visual prosthesis will consist out of two different parts. There's of course the most important part is the brain implant, consisting out of hundreds or thousands of these flexible, very tiny threads and electrode wires connected to then an encapsulation with some electronics inside. But then of course what the user will actually mostly work with is the external part that consists out of a pair of camera glasses with some integrated cameras to capture images from the environment, but also capture the eye movements, because as we've seen in research from the past years, that these eye movements even with blind people are still very important. And then using also some other external electronics integrated in the camera glasses, we will be able to transmit both energy and these stimulation patterns wirelessly towards the brain implant. So basically, most of what the patients will feel will be these camera glasses with then also a portable microprocessor, for example, in the shape of a cell phone that they can just put in their pocket.
And how long do you expect that to last? Like, would they have to charge it every day or every hour or something like this, or what do you think?
So right now we're working towards a solution that they could use without charging for a full day. So of course, during the clinical trials, we'll have to see what a full day means. For some people, it might be 8 hours. For some people, it might be 16 hours. For some people, it might even be longer. But that's going to depend a little bit also on the user requirements and what they want to get out of it again. And then we can slightly adapt our product based on their user needs.
Cool. And you guys have been quite lucky. You've gotten funding. I mean, you mentioned the non-traditional funding, the VC or just individual investor in the beginning, and then you mentioned some other prestigious grants. Do you want to talk about that, and how is it looking? What's the timeline looking for the future as well?
Okay, so we did start 4 years ago with each seed. I guess according to US norms, it would be like pre-seed funding, like something like 600K. But we've raised about, count everything, including what went to our project partners, about 5 million since in non-dilutive grants. And we can especially be grateful to the European Union because they have this EIC scheme, which is basically their basic technology development program, and they really try to support these emerging technologies. It's quite competitive, so the EIC Pathfinder grant, which is the basic research grant that we got first, has only a success rate of about 2%, so we really stood out apparently. And then also there's still the local government who also supports us with additional funds. For example, Maarten's PhD scholarship is also basically granted by the local government.
And are you counting that in the fund, or like in the
this is all counted in the fund.
Okay.
So basically, we haven't raised any private funding. So now it's basically we're starting to talk to investors again. We were accepted into some incubators that also invest a token amount and then basically help connect you with larger investors. So there was IMEC, iStart, and there's also Plug and Play Ventures now from San Francisco. So the paperwork there has not been signed yet, but they already have arranged some pitch talks for us. So there's some investors also that we were able to convince that it's very viable, but they said to us, okay, we're going to wait another half year, a year to see how you guys progress. It seems that you can still do a lot with the money you still have, because we still have a runway of about 2 years now. But we don't really like to hear this because we're still a very small, scrappy company, and it would be really nice to upscale it rather quickly to something that can actually do a full medical device development, right? Because we're really still at a proof of concept scale. We've done nice studies on monkeys thanks to the research collaborations that we have done with the facility of Professor Janssen at the University Hospital. We've done a lot thanks to our hands-on access to the clean room, which allowed us to produce series and series of these implants, always a little bit better at extremely low cost. But it can only go so far, of course. So now we're a bit in a limbo. We recently were awarded a second 2.5 million grant from the European Union again, like a follow-up grant on the first one, which could allow us to just do a first-in-human test with a limited size system. So it would not have the electronics implanted, but it would be very similar to the monkey tests we have been doing so far. So basically, there would be a blind volunteer with some 100 or 200 electrodes implanted in the visual cortex, but the electronics would still be like commercial electronics that are hooked to the system from the outside. And of course, we're super grateful that we get this. It will still take 2 years to get the actual permissions to do this and to do additional tests. So it's also not going to be there tomorrow. And because we know all these things take time, we would really like to, in parallel, also work on the final device development. So all the development of the final version of the electronics, the quality system, all the ISO tests that you need to do before you're even allowed to do a full clinical trial. So we're really still in the adventurous phase of a startup, I would say, right? It goes a bit slower than, let's say, a typical AI startup, which can go from nothing to a large company in 1 or 2 years. But for a medical device startup, I think we're doing it at a reasonably good pace.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think like Frederik said, so we really, the last 4 or 5 years, they really fully de-risked our core technology, the brain implant, and we're now really in a phase that we need to do also the traditional stuff like working on the electronics and the wireless design, but those are, let's say, fixed problems because also other neurotechnology companies or even other like consumer product companies know how to transmit wirelessly data and power. So I think, without any shame, I'm just going to plug if any investors are listening, we're currently raising our Series A's to really move faster and move sooner to the clinic, because like we said, it's just a matter of fact that we really need the clinical test because we learned what we could with the animal testing, and if we don't speed up, then everything will just be prolonged towards the market and also to just patients that really need something in their lives to see.
So what kind of acceleration rate do you think you like getting investment versus not getting investment?
Yeah, so the thing is that we really talked already with a lot of suppliers. I think also Maarten can comment on it later in terms of the electronics. But if we look at their timeline now, the main bottleneck would really be everything to get ISO certified stimulator chip and everything in terms of how to use the implant. So we could like the plan is right now, do a clinical test with the pedestal and with wired connections to the implant. But then everything needs to follow after that with a wireless implant and a full design freeze anyway. So the longer the Series A waits, the longer you just need for these electronics development and the full wireless system to get approval for that and to really push to the clinic, I would say.
So indeed, us waiting 2 years or 3 years to get investment versus us getting investment now would mean just 3 years longer waiting time to get to the market. At this point, we have so much data already on the monkeys about safety, also about efficacy. There is already data with a limited number of electrodes on human volunteers. So we know that the basic principles behind what we're doing are all right, and we have human proof of that. We have stability data of our implants. So now it's a matter of upscaling to be able to do the engineering needed to actually get a full scale system, and also of course to do then the clinical trials afterwards.
Okay. And then, yeah, you guys are here, IMEC, and they have the ASML. The ASML's from here, right? And they do a lot of testing. We did a clean room tour yesterday, and they showed the big extreme ultraviolet, lithography machines, and it's a few $100 million or few €100 million tool, and you guys have all this stuff over here, so it's really incredible. So you guys are fabricating your own devices, and not at that level.
No, I should say we're so glad we don't need a 300 million machine to actually make our stuff. So altogether, the equipment that we'll need is a few million, and of course a clean room around it. It's relatively low tech compared to what you need to build a nanometer scale IC. Luckily,
exactly. It's like the cutting edge from the 1970s or 1980s or something like this. So nothing too crazy.
With some kitchen secrets that
exactly,
we're not going to delve into.
So yeah. Do you want to talk about this fabrication process? I mean, that seems also like a big undertaking. And you mentioned, you're not ISO certified, but you would want to do that, or do you have like a human grade clean room or something like this, or how does that look?
Yeah, so indeed, at this point, we're basically using a shared facility like every startup would do, right? Eventually, if you want to go to production and to really get to the market, you will need your own ISO certified facility, because of course you need to guarantee consistency and safety. And here, sometimes people work with things we don't control, right? We have to share the lab with people who do piezoelectric material research, with people who make superconducting devices. Well, everything happens together in one fab. But okay, this being said, with some simple measures, we can already drastically reduce the contamination, like just using your own glassware, just using new inserts for spin coaters and stuff like that. So we actually never had issues during our animal testing in terms of biocompatibility, even though we didn't use a ISO certified facility to this point. But of course, for a commercial product, this is not going to be practical anymore, or possible in any case. It is a bit of a novel thing in medical device technology to use these wafer scale fabrication techniques, right? I don't know at this point anything that's on the market that's built like this. Do you guys have an idea? Is any precedent that? Well, of course, Neuralink is now using similar techniques. They're not on the market yet. There's maybe, things like flexible PCB fabrication are also done lithographically, but it's also a bit of a lower tier tech. We've noticed that the industry has already made some investments in these techniques that haven't led to products that went to the market. I'm, for example, thinking about the Sapiens company that had a DBS implant, which was also built with thin film fabrication technique. But okay, this was like an earlier stage design. It also it was not polymer based, so it was relatively brittle, and the fabrication, I know somebody who worked there, so I know how they fabricated it. The fabrication techniques were not really reliable and not that much scalable. So we really have something that's using standard fabrication techniques and that actually is scalable to hundreds and even thousands of wafers. You can just easily buy automated machines. You just need a few people to operate them, and that's it. And I guess that's also one of the reasons why we already got some interest from industry as well. So we have now this research project with Cochlear Inc., the market leader in cochlear implants, and they're mostly interested in this thin film electrotechnology for future products. I'm not saying future products that will be on the market in 2 or 3 years, but they also, of course, know that the world is not standing still, that there is a Neuralink around, that there is other companies around that are really pushing the boundaries in neurotechnology, and it would be a shame for them to just sit on the sidelines. And then, of course, for them to sponsor a small research project with a company like us is a good start to get into the game. And also, basically, if you just look at their requirements, they basically have a significant cost involved in actually fabricating just the leads for cochlear implant. It's quite difficult. They have 22 electrodes. They all have to be jammed into something with a diameter smaller than 1 millimeter. All these wires need to be manually connected. They of course use laser welding, but it's still like basically a bit like Swiss watchmaking, the techniques involved. And of course, if this can be eventually changed with something that's almost completely automatable, both the resolution of simulation, but also the reliability and especially the fabrication costs could be improved a lot. The fabrication cost that's involved with a single wafer in a say medium scale process, it's something like $2,000, but you can easily put 20, 30, 40 leads on a single 8-inch wafer. You could in principle even go to 300 millimeter wafers if you really have to. So there are a lot of advantages associated with it. I know of course, medical device industries are typically quite conservative because they, of course, have to change a lot, have to go through a large regulatory process every time they change a lot. But they are certainly open to look at innovations we noticed.
Wow. Yeah. And do you think you could have like a bay or like, utilize the existing clean room, just wall off a section for you guys, like only you guys are allowed there, key card access or something like this?
Yeah, we know, especially Laurens has even visited companies that work like this. So some tools, well, you can really argue about some vacuum tools, for example, that they are clean enough by themselves such that they don't really transfer any contamination from one substrate to another. So why not share them? And I know, for example, from people of second sight that they also, for example, still used external services for metal deposition. That's one of these things that are done in a vacuum and that you can, I would say, reliably outsource to another facility without being afraid for contamination. But of course, especially FDA is extremely strict on materials and on possible sources of contamination. So you would really have to argue well.
Yeah, no, that's very exciting. This episode is sponsored by blackswan-ip, a boutique law firm specializing in intellectual property for neurotech and medtech startups, founded by Eugene Daneshvar, who holds both a JD and PhD in biomedical engineering. blackswan-ip helps innovators secure patents, develop smart IP strategies, and even navigate funding. Whether you're an early-stage startup or scaling your medtech venture, they'll work with you using flat-fee pricing and deep technical expertise. Learn more at blackswan-ip.com. So what's the future plan or the vision, ReVision. So would it be staying only with blind people, or what kind of market penetration? Would we have kind of like Geordi LaForge in Star Trek where you could look at different spectra, you could look at the UV or the infrared spectrum or something like this? Any more sci-fi kind of stuff, or just really dealing with the blind population?
Yeah, I would say after a standard camera reel, any add-ons would be extra cool. Right? You can also just think about like directly linking it with your laptop, so you don't even need to look at the screen. I guess the quality would be much better if you take out that step. Maybe blind people would like infrared vision. It would maybe even just easier for the algorithm to interpret things like that, because then at night or during the day it will be quite a similar image. Yeah, and then of course, there is a whole human augmentation game. It will probably not be for the coming decades, right? But it's also one of the reasons I think why investors invest such amounts in Neuralink, right? Because they do think it will not stay at just helping people with certain disabilities, which is a reasonable market, right? That is, we estimate the market for blind people will be something like $2 billion a year, similar to the cochlear implant market. And there's of course aphasia, maybe some forms of deafness that can not be helped with a cochlear implant. There's also some talks about anything that's now done with DBS that could perhaps be done better with high resolution neurostimulation. I don't know much proof about this, but at least the tuning of this could be done in a better way if the resolution would be higher. There's a whole paraplegic colleagues of Onward Medical work to help to restore walking abilities to people that are tetraplegic or paraplegic. They use more traditional technology, but it could also be that there could be a need for future versions to have a higher resolution. So basically all the miracles from the Bible could become true one day. We're starting with blindness. It's a very challenging application, I have to admit. It's not just a new DBS lead and a little bit of extra software. You really need to make a quantum leap in technology. But I think that's also something that can set you apart from competitors. There's not that many people that actually dare to make that jump. So we think we made the right choice there, and it makes you stand out.
Yeah, I think let's start with restoring vision, and then we can think about ameliorating vision. Otherwise, we also need to change our slogan too fast, I think. But like Frederik said, the good thing is that we're really a technology company, and that means that our technology can also be used for other applications, as we don't really outsource anything, and we're really making everything ourselves.
Yeah. And then, so as we talked about too, there's a big graveyard here in this visual neuroprosthetics, Pixium and Second Sight, they were rebought and everything like this. And even back into the 2000s, the William Dobell, right? Like very, very old stuff. And so why do you think you will survive where others have died?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, right? It cannot predict the future. I do believe in the way we are handling our R&D and the concept that we've put forward. It's the most simple one that will actually work, basically. Yeah, in time of Second Sight, people really focused basically on the wrong organ. Of course, they also didn't know at that point, right? But you do see that more and more people are now focusing on the brain. So we think we made the right choice there before others. And then also, well, there's a second point. That's the financial point, right? There is the technological point, which I think there we were good. Then there is the question of will you find ever this maybe 300 or 400 million that you will need to put this on the market? Well, you see some companies don't make it, some get acquired. For example, Pixium actually will likely make it to the market after being acquired, which was after they went bankrupt. So their investors didn't get anything. So it was not regarded as a good investment, obviously. But still, of course, for at least some blind people, because they have more like a niche market, it will at least help somewhat. We get good signals from investors that there is actually money still. Yeah, even in Europe, I'm talking about funds like EQT and people like that, also some Dutch funds that are quite big and that could finance this. But most are really waiting for human data. So I think we have to take it one step at a time. We should really get, if all goes well, even with the funding we have now, some proof on humans. We think we can raise also some additional funding to accelerate our other developments at the same time. Otherwise, we would just lose too much time. And if this looks all right, we will be able to convince larger investors to really fund the B series and actually put it on the market. But we just have to take it one step at a time.
I also would like to add there that there's indeed quite a large graveyard of companies that tried the visual prosthesis approach. But I really want to stress that we also learned a lot from the companies and the people that are on this graveyard, in some cases even literally, because research on the visual cortex and the visual system has been ongoing for 50 or 60 years. So already 50 years ago, we saw the first examples or the first proof of principle of such a visual cortical prosthesis. And we've also noticed over the past years that we've been working on this, that there's a very lively community of the visual prosthesis community. Of course, because still a lot of this research is still academical. And there are still conferences like, for example, the Eye in the Chip, but also the Brain in the Chip, where researchers and companies from all over the world come together and also share their research results. And of course, we're a company, so we keep some of the secrets of our technology for ourselves, of course, but we also go to these conferences to share our results and to share things about our technology. And I think that's also a very important aspect, that everybody is learning from each other, and that even though part of the neuroscience was already known like 20 years ago, these people 20 years ago did not have access to the technology that we have right now because of advances in the meantime in other domains like computer chips, for example. So while both the neuroscience and the technology are progressing both at the same time, I'm very hopeful that either we and hopefully we at ReVision Implant, but that some company or some research group in the next years will see an important advance towards an actual functional visual prosthesis.
Yeah, I would say even with neural implant technology, that of 10 years back you couldn't do this. I mean, it was not evolved enough to really have both the right resolution as well as to reach the right target. You need the right insertion procedure, you need the right materials, you need also stability data that shows that it actually lasts 10 years or preferably even 20 to 30 years. And that's what we also just recently reached. So it really feels that the time is ripe now.
And I think also to come fully back to the question why you think we would succeed is, I think in our company we have a culture, or we created a culture that, for example, the CEO, Frederik, is still in the clean room. He's not on his desk just doing CEO stuff only, but he's actually hands-on just in the lab. I think that's also a main benefit of what we're doing, that you really see the things that go wrong and the things that go right by your own eyes, and you can quickly adapt. And also to add on that, I think neurotechnology in itself is not really a sector where the one that throws the biggest amount of money onto the problem will generally succeed the best. I think it's really about gathering the right talent and the right consortia, and also that the best solution in the end will just prove to be the best in the market, I think, as well.
So you guys have a very deep technical knowledge and background and everything like this. So you're not outsourcing it to another company. Were the issues previously, were they technical issues? Is that the reason for the graveyard too, or was it different reasons too?
I was about some gossip about former colleagues. Basically, I know of a few. For example, the German company had some quality issues. So basically, they had implants that failed after 1 or 2 years. I know second size was very decent in quality. There's still people around with this implant. So of course now, after 20 years, some parts are failing. And well, there was, for example, an IEEE Spectrum article about this more like technical graveyard where people are trying to still exchange parts so to keep some implants alive, and some former employees of second sight could still help a little bit here and there. But of course, the access to resources was also limited. So basically, there's so many things that can kill your company, right? It's not always the same.
I think the graveyard is also filled with great technologies, but great technologies that were not a match for this problem. And that's also to come back to the multiple reasons why ReVision Implant could possibly succeed in the next years, is that we noticed over the past years that we have a very strong collaboration with the neuroscientific side, and that this is really important because we've seen in our application, but also in a lot of other applications, that using the wrong technology, even though it's great technology, but if the technology is not completely suited for this application, then you will just not get out of it what you want. And you need the right technology to make advances on the neuroscientific side and to learn more about the neuroscientific part. And after you've learned more about the neuroscientific part, you can adjust your technology again. So there's really a lot of iterations going back and forth between the neuroscience and the technology. And I think that's really crucial in developing technology like this.
But don't let your visual prosthesis company be led by neuroscientists. We also learned that this is a bad idea. You really need people that just tinker all the time. And at one point, we also discovered failure modes in the academic technology that we started with that we just didn't expect. And if at that point we would have had to go back to a supplier to just try something and then just wait for a result and then test it and send it back, we would have lost the game already. Basically, now we can iterate within 1 month. We can make a completely new design with a new fabrication run and start testing. So we can really see our technology progress from month to month. It's not. I think the electrode technology is now stable. We haven't had to change anything anymore the last year. There's just some cosmetic things that we can still tune. But in case something would still pop up, we can again go to the lab hands-on and work day and night to fix it. And that's something you really need in a startup, right? Not only in an AI or in an IT startup, but also in a deep tech startup. You really need access to tools and to the people that actually build stuff, and you cannot just think of something brilliant and then ask somebody else to build it and then just wait for a few months and then just take a good look at it. That's not going to learn you enough.
Especially because, a lot of times the communication isn't 100% clear, or something's lost, and you think you said something, but they understood something different. So if you're trying to explain a problem, then, being able to do it yourself. That's something I've noticed, in my research too, is a lot of times having the surgeon there, having, whoever is involved and knowledgeable about that and being able to fix it right away is much better and much faster.
The best thing is you really have to have people around you that care 100%. If it's just somebody who is getting paid the same anyway, whatever the outcome, it's not gonna work. They might still say something useful from time to time, but just the commitment is not really there. I guess you also worked at the university, you will probably have had a technician that will just cared about things and that made things right, and another technician that just maybe literally did what you asked, but then still, of course, without any personal input, it goes haywire at one point or another. So that's the real secret, I think, behind startups that work, is having hands-on work on all the important aspects and not just outsourcing it and just expecting it to be done for you.
Yeah, and that's, for example, what I like about Neuralink is it's, vertically integrated, everything is inside, and they're not, outsourcing. Even the clean room, they're building that, themselves. And I think Precision, they were talking about doing that too. They spent, a sizable portion of their investment money to build the clean room and just to make sure that everything is perfect. And then that way they can't blame, this small thing, whatever, the custodian or the person who cleans the toilets, they messed up and they've made everything fail, or I don't know, whatever. But yeah, great. Well, I wish you guys obviously lots of luck, and I want to see you survive. I don't want another tombstone in the graveyard, and we can, hopefully talk about your successes in a few years, and we'll circle back, and it won't be, 3 people or 3 employees, it'll be 3,000 and very successful. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you guys wanted to mention?
No, I indeed, like you said, to come back to that, it might be the first time in your podcast that half of the company is literally on your podcast. So indeed, next time you come back, we'll try to be with a couple more.
Yeah, I still would like to thank everybody who's helped us so far, because indeed, it's just 6 full-time people. If you add some half-timers, we can maybe get to 8 FTEs. But there's also still these researchers at different institutes that are full-time or part-time committed to the project. If you really start to count everybody, we're at least 20 guys now. Well, and some girls. And then not enough, I guess, for European quota. But anyway, and without them, this would surely not have been possible. Yeah, obviously, you've seen our clean room. There's 15 million of equipment there, but it's obviously not ours. And also, I would really like to thank people that made this possible, that we could still use it for a very modest fee, and that allows us to really make progress here.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.